you, Nancy. Thank you so much. I'm such a fan.
Well, I've become such a fan of you too. You know, years ago, I was one of those corporate people that would prepare the PowerPoint presentation and get my fancy pants suit on and present like on the PowerPoint and just be so perfect. And I thought I was doing it right. And come to find out, everything I learned in corporate doesn't work at all in the online space. The more human I can be, the more relatable I can be, the more connected I can be, the more I actually connect with people who might actually decide that I might be their teacher. But it took me so long to get those lessons right. And I'll never forget the time that I gave one of those talks to some appreciative audience that was being more than cordial, where the evaluation said, I didn't pay $45 for the chicken lunch to watch someone hold on to PowerPoint like a crutch, hold on to the podium for dear life and pray for the presentation to be over. I think that was like my wake-up call that maybe I had a few things to learn. So we've all had those humbling moments.
You know, it's so interesting, Nancy. Absolutely. I don't know anybody who hasn't had one of those embarrassing reports that they could give, but it's so interesting to me that so many times we get so hyper focused on what it is that the content is that we forget that there's a different piece that people are also responding to, which has to do again with your presence, as you're saying, and it has to do with being able to connect with people as human beings as opposed to receptors who are just being able to drink in your data. So to really kind of move into a whole other way where you're actually speaking to somebody that you really feel you want to give them this gift, you want to honor them with this gift, they want to receive it, that there's an exchange that goes back and forth. And it's, you know, it's actually been really interesting to see how do we pivot that to online, to virtual, because of course, when you're in front of an audience, I've done a lot of performing. And so when you're in front of an audience, that exchange, that live exchange, which I know for me, I've missed a lot. You know, it's a very special energy that gets created that way. But that you can actually have that online. I remember one of the first online classes I taught that had, I guess, about maybe 50 people or something. And I was like, how am I going to even see them all? So you could only see 49 little boxes. But as I started moving into it, and as I started to scan that screen, that I actually could still do some of that same thing, although it's not quite the same techniques as what you would do live.
Well, since you've got such an amazing background, I want to just tell the audience a little bit about you before we get into the nitty-gritty of our interview. Vicki Got fires up visionary speakers to amplify their charisma and deliver their message with passion, presence, and power. Drawing on decades of theater performance and directing experience and lifelong study of martial arts, Vicki stands apart from other trainers by focusing on both the crafting of the stories her clients tell and the energy they bring to deliver their message so they can make even more impact for their memorable and remarkable delivery. Since 1987, her methods have touched and transformed hundreds of speakers to stand apart and deliver with joy, confidence, and ease through live and virtual workshops that get everyone talking. So awesome, awesome. So how did you get into this work and why?
I got into, you know, when you say this work, that's actually a big span because I've actually doing the piece that's the martial arts or the energetic part in terms of what is your charisma? What does that actually mean in terms of something tangible that you can do? Since, well, I'm going to date myself, but since 1979. So I've been doing this work for a very long time. But the way I got into the coaching for presentation skills, for how do you show up in your best self, was really because I was doing a lot of speaking myself. And as I was going into these different events, and a lot of times I would be one of several speakers, and I would sort of notice that there were these, you know, as they were speaking and they were delivering, you know, something that really mattered to them, that there were people in the audience texting or, you know, sort of talking to each other or just not there, just really wasn't landing with them. And it was breaking my heart. And I didn't really know what to do about it. I don't really like giving advice to people unasked for. But somebody came up to me and she said, you know, I want to be a presenter just like you. Can you teach a class? And I said, well, I can teach a class to tell you how to be a better you, but I don't want you to be just like me. That wouldn't be real. And so I started these classes and they sold out immediately. It was very, very popular. So, and that's where I discovered that my joy of theater, which I've been doing since I was 7 years old. So I won't, I mean, that's that's close to 60 years now, to date myself. And then the part that has to do with how do you show up and be in your power, no matter what is coming at you from, you know, either lack of response or hostile response. I have so many stories about clients dealing with hecklers and stuff like that, and how to deal with that. That's not just about the content you're delivering at that point. That's about how you're showing up, and as you call it, bending and swaying with what's coming to you. So I was invited basically to teach something. People, it responded, you know, it clearly met a need, and then I dove in all the way, and just what I found was I just loved it, because I was working with people everywhere from business owners and lawyers and CEOs to people who are artists and people who are storytellers and people who are healers. And it was a wide range. And what everybody had in common was that they started to recognize that the energy you bring to everything that you do is what matters the most. And so combining how do you craft what you're saying and how do you deliver what you're saying is, I think, what makes me stand a little bit apart from other presentation trainers.
So let me dig in a little bit about that, because there's the energy we bring, and then there's the stories that we tell. So let's start with the energy that we bring.
Yes.
Sometimes what I've noticed, especially for people who are newer in their journeys, as I was, you know, when I first started, is I over rely on a template, over rely on a presentation, over rely on a script. I may deliver the message brilliantly according to what I thought the audience wanted to hear, but for some reason it just fell completely flat. And now I know why. But when you think about the energy that people bring or fail to bring, what are some of those mistakes that you've noticed that will give everyone a wake-up call about whether or not they're making those mistakes?
I just want, I'm happy to answer that question. And I just want to acknowledge, Nancy, that wherever it was that you started, where people were, you know, talking about their chicken dinner instead of what you presented, you have come. I mean, I didn't know you then, but what I do know is I actually have seen you grown over time as a speaker. And I just want to say that some of the elements that people can bring, they can just watch you. So one of the things is to not focus so much on how am I appearing. What is the information, and how can I make it perfect, and how can I say just the right word, and how am I, how are people perceiving me, but rather to focus out, send that energy out to, I think of it as sending love. That may be a little bit woo-woo for people, but I think about it as, the passion that I feel in my heart for what I'm wanting people to understand when I'm doing a presentation, or what I'm wanting the gift I'm wanting to give them. So to focus on them instead of you is the first one. The second, and then, of course, we all have our running monologue. It's like, oh my gosh, I forgot this, or I should say that, and that's always going to be there. But it's really a question of like if we're radios and we're hearing all these different signals all the time, it's like, which channel are you wanting to tune into? And the channel you're wanting to tune into is you. That's number one. I think another mistake that people make is a sense of not really owning that they know what they know. And this is a little bit more subtle, where people will feel like, I need to have the script. I need to memorize the script. I'm coming, I've been an actor since I was a kid, but so I've used to do a lot of scripted, plays and stuff like that. And in the last 20 years or 27 years, I've been in a improv theater company that's not doing improv for comedy's sake, but it's called playback theater, where people from the audience tell stories from their lives, and the actors and musicians listen to the story, and then they play it back, listening for the story under the story. One of the things that the training for that has done for me is be able to really listen for what is going on underneath. And that's what I like to bring out in my clients and students. I like to bring out something that's going on that allows that authenticity to emerge. So this is a very delicate thing, and it takes a little bit of direction, I think, because some people feel like, well, to be authentic, I have to reveal stuff that I don't want to reveal, or I need to confess that I don't really feel secure and I'm really scared, you know, things that actually doesn't really serve them. It's authentic, but it doesn't serve them. So how to find that authenticity that has vulnerability in it, but doesn't linger in that vulnerability in such a way that it makes the audience feel like they have to take care of you. It's more that, you know, it's really a question of how do you create that vulnerability so people can feel like they are you. I always say, invite people into the movie of what your experience is. When you tell your story, let them be in it with you as opposed to just view it or just describe it. So that's another mistake, describing something, you know, this, you know, this, there's this, and then there's this, and there's this, and there's this, as opposed to imagine yourself here, you know, bring somebody in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I appreciate that. One of the things I've learned from some of the speaker trainers that I've learned from in the past is the idea that you can tap and transport people to a place or a moment in time where they can feel and be and taste and experience what you were feeling, tasting, and experiencing in that moment. You know, come with me to a lounge chair in sunny San Diego where the rays of sun are warming my skin, and the trade winds are blowing, and the mint from my iced tea is infused, and I'm just getting ready to relax when all of a sudden the phone rings, and it's National Public Radio. You know, it's like I've tried to touch on what you could taste and what you could hear and what you could taste, experience, and it's like, oh, we're going somewhere, and she's taking me with you, versus just stating the facts and the person in the audience wondering, well, why does this matter to me? You know,
exactly. That was a beautiful demonstration of what I just described. Exactly right. That's what I mean by going into the movie. When you're at a movie, you don't remember that you're sitting on the chair and that you're holding a thing of popcorn. You actually, you know, you're there with Indiana Jones or whoever. You know, you're experiencing. Hopefully, if it's a good movie, you're experiencing what that actor or that story is telling you
there's
is
something
happening.
about being mesmerized.
Yes.
If you could
Yes.
be mesmerized.
You know, there's a TED talk I saw not long ago that I really need to remember this person's name, but what they did was they did this test where they connected electrodes to people's in audience to their brains, and then a storyteller came out and started telling a story, and they had electrodes too. And before the storyteller came out, you know, the readings were all chaotic like that. And when the storyteller actually came out and started, over about 5 minutes, they all started registering the same pattern, which was really, really interesting to me, because that was a place to me where deeper than even how do we promote our business or how do we promote our case when I work with lawyers, or how do we do this or that, is that sense of how do we actually feel one another? How do we actually experience empathy? Because that cultivation of empathy to me is a big part of what allows us to be connected across difference and through, you know, as humans. So I think that's another big piece of it, is to remember this is actually an opportunity to create connection on a whole other level.
And speaking of creating connection on a whole other level, as we're for most of the time lately connecting with people virtually, there are some very simple mistakes that people make that break the connection. And there's also bigger things that they do that are mistakes that fracture the connection. Are there specifics you can share with regard to some of those mistakes?
Well, one basic one is, where are your eyes? So looking at the camera as opposed to looking down at yourself or looking at the other person to keep your attention on the camera. And I always remember, again, dating myself, I remember Romper Room, you know, where she would hold up a magnifying, I see Nancy, I see Vicky, I see Susie, I always imagine who is it I'm speaking to, and I really try to speak to the people that I love, or people that are just, you know, interested and connected to me. So that's one thing. Another thing I think, and I alluded to it a little bit earlier, is this is again more subtle, but the owning of your own information, so that not to depend on the script that you've created. Even if you've created a script and you really need to memorize it, it's the best way for you to feel confident, to see at some point if you can just relax and just know that even if you lose the script, you have that information in you because it's yours. It's something that you've created. It's something that you've come up with. So it's right there for you. It's right at hand. There may be a better way to say it, but to really rely on that inner knowing, to hold that as confidence, to not, as you did, holding onto the podium for dear life or the PowerPoint for, this is what the next point is, and I got to get it just right. It's that sense of perfection being the enemy of
Isn't perfection kind of off-putting for most audiences?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what could be worse? Somebody who's got it all together. I don't know. I guess some people are really drawn to perfection, or to that kind of, I am the master of the universe and I know everything. That's not my people, and that's not the people that I'm drawn to either. I think, but the main thing is the damage that perfection does to ourselves, what we do to ourselves in pursuit of perfection. I think that's the biggest harm.
So that brings me to a story that I remember so vividly. A number of years ago, I was lucky enough to go to the Oprah Live Your Best Life event in New York City. And Elizabeth, she wrote Eat, Pray, Love.
Gilbert.
Yeah, Elizabeth Gilbert was on the stage. This is the best-selling book of all time. A lot of pressure. So she stands up there and she says to this audience of 6,000 people, every morning, I get up about 4:30 and I meditate for half an hour. Then I put on my jogging shoes and I go out and run 5 miles. I'm back to my apartment. I brew my coffee. I read the New York Times, and then I'm about ready to start my day. And then there's this big long pause. And she says, are you buying that? And she says, that so isn't happening. And I'm guessing it's not happening for you, and it's not happening for you, and it's not happening for you either. And can we just all be human beings and realize that we're rolling out of bed later than we want to, looking like hell, and just doing the best we can? This is how she started her talk. And instantly she made 6,000 new best friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was so riveted by that opening that I never forgot it, because she brought us in right away with this touch and transport moment that sounded so perfect and made us all feel so inadequate. And then she let us know, no, that ain't happening.
So it's a perfect example of vulnerability as strength, right? I started, for some reason, when I was 17, I started that as a mantra for myself. I started thinking vulnerability is strength. I didn't even know quite what it meant, but that's a great example of it. It's a kind of vulnerability where people don't feel like, oh, I have to take care of her because she's not getting up and running. But people go, yeah, that's me. So yeah. I love that story.
Well, so some of the mistakes are, we're forgetting to look at the camera. We're forgetting to bring ourselves to the message. We're over relying on a script instead of embodying the message. And then when it comes to actually telling stories, give us some guidance there, because oftentimes today with Facebook Live and podcast guesting, it's a limited time only situation that you actually get to take to the microphone. One of my things is that I think sometimes people take way too long to get to the point, or they tell stories that are not relevant to the situation, or maybe they ramble and take way too much time without connecting the dots. What are some of the mistakes people make with regard to storytelling that can help us do better next time we get a chance?
Great question. Thank you for asking. I think that I agree with all of those things that you've observed. I think that, first of all, having a sense of a map, and there's a common thing for a lot of speakers to do something called the J story, where you tell, things are like this now, and then it wasn't always like that, and then they tell the bad hardships, and then and things are even better. This dip. For me at this point, that feels so overused that I almost stopped listening. So I think that you can use it. It's not that I'm saying you can't talk about how things were hard and why things are better now and why what you do has helped that. But I think that there's a way in which when people don't know where they're going with their story, that's when they start to ramble. I think that where people get the most lost is in that fine balance between too many details and too few details. So either I'm telling you, I did this and then I did that and then I did this and after that I did that. So they're just kind of reciting a resume or a kind of a dateline, or they're getting so lost in not really knowing what's important that they lose what the connection could be. I think there's something about really knowing what is the essence of the story. And to me, that's where I feel like that's where I love to help, because I can hear that really fast from people, and we don't always know, right? We don't always know what's important and what's not. I remember I had one client who said she had worked with me. After working with me, she said, you know, I used to hate to go and speak and tell my story. I was so bored with it. I just couldn't go through it one more time. And she said, now I feel like I can't wait to tell it. And I've seen her do several speakings since, and every time she tells it's a little different. I mean, and I have people who tell some dramatic stories. I have another client who was a refugee from Afghanistan. When she was 5 years old, she walked across the desert to Pakistan as a 5-year-old with her family. A lot of intense stories in there. But she, you know, because it was so, you know, 5 years old, it was so ingrained in her, she didn't realize the kind of impact it would have. So, you know, how do we lift up what actually, you know, what is a child like going across the desert? It's so beautiful here. Look at all the light. She's, you know, loving it, and then having something happen with somebody with a gun and being really fearful. And so to be able to kind of go into these different aspects that are the essence, and how do you bring that up? So for her, the essence really had to do with resilience and finding her own sense of worth in herself during this journey, which has now carried her forward in terms of how she helps other people, particularly Muslim women. So there's a way in which there's, you know, there's this sense of how do you find what that essence is, and tell somebody the story, ask them what they heard that really resonated for them, and then take note of that. Tell it to several people, or talk to somebody who's a coach, but really find a way to get that feedback, because it's very hard when it's our own story to really know what matters and what doesn't, right?
Well, something else that I've noted is that sometimes if you are someone who has been invited to give the same talk again and again and again to multiple audiences, at some point it becomes the speaker can become disconnected from the story, because it's like, oh, another gig, another day, another dollar. I'm going to give that talk again and again. Amen. And here we go again. And there must be some kind of, I think about James Taylor singing You've Got a Friend, or Fire and Rain. How many times has James Taylor sang Fire and Rain over the last 40 years? But every time I hear it, it's like an old friend that I'm so happy to hear. And it's his soulful delivery and the story that he's telling as he's singing this song that always brings me back to the present, and what beauty there is in that music. And so I think that if you're someone who's been given the same talk again and again, there's got to be something that we can do to snap out of the rote delivery and remember that everyone in that room hasn't had the privilege of hearing it as many times as you've given it. Right?
Yeah. Yes, I think that I love that, Nancy. Yes, I think that's actually one key realization, is to remember that not everybody's heard it. In terms of somebody giving a talk again and again, chances are in the course of the years that you've been giving this talk, other stories might come in. So you might start to replace stories or find new stories. That's one way to refresh. Another is to, again, remember that the impact that you have isn't necessarily that you're experiencing yourself as a speaker is not necessarily what your audience is. I can remember one time I was touring in Europe with my theater company, and we did a show and we'd all had this sort of traumatic experience, which I won't get into, right before the show. So in the show, it felt like we were all kind of almost bumping into each other, and we were all like kind of out of our bodies and just kind of going through it. And we were like, this was the worst show ever. And people were coming up to us ever saying, that was so powerful. Thank you so much. And that's when I realized you just don't know. As the speaker, you just don't know. I mean, you get feedback as a speaker in terms of, do people go to the back of the room, or people buying your stuff, that kind of thing. But in terms of the actual, the ways in which you're holding people's attention, sometimes it's really about technique. That technique just carries you forward. We can't always show up in our fullest presence. We can try, we can certainly call on things. There's certain techniques we can do to call on things. And that's what I do when I'm about to go on stage and I've just had a few, too much going on, and I have to really pull myself in. There's techniques to pull yourself in center so that when you come out, you're really exuding what you want to exude. But
are you willing to share a couple of those?
Absolutely.
For anyone who's ever tried to calm the butterflies and get them to fly in formation before it's time to go on. I mean, I think I was confessing to a group the other day that anytime I've ever been invited to give a big keynote where there was money involved in a large audience, the night before, I'm instantly going through how did I hoodwink them into paying me this much money? And is this talk any good anyway? And do I need to start from a clean sheet of paper and stay up all night and start over? I have all this self-doubt and imposter disease that comes up. And then the next morning, somehow I managed to pull it off. What exercises or rituals would be helpful to people who ever go through any of this anxiety so that we can rock it with a little less drama?
The transformation of stage fright is such a big topic. I thank you for asking that. And I just want to say that never really goes away, right? I've been performing, doing theater and performance since I was 7 years old, starting with summer stock as a kid. And then and I've performed before small audiences and very, very, very large ones and beyond. And I still get stage fright. I still get those butterflies. Sometimes they do fly in formation, which I love. I love that. That's a beautiful metaphor, Nancy. But I think that there's a couple of physiological techniques that you can do that can help transform that energy, because that stage fright is really just energy, and you want to be able to pull that energy up and through you, transform it, because when we're frightened, it's a sense of freezing and getting stuck and stagnant. We want the energy to flow. It's like thawing out the ice in your belly, or the ice in your gut, that, oh my gosh, they're going to discover that I'm really a fraud. Imposter syndrome is so pervasive.
It's rampant.
It's rampant. In fact, I was working yesterday with a client who is going to be presenting. This is a big deal, presenting in front of the Supreme Court of Canada. And she's going through imposter syndrome. Now, she is a very, very skilled. I mean, for her to get to this place where she's actually even doing this presentation or doing this case is huge. She's extremely brilliant. And so we're actually going to be working today on making her, what does she call it? Her presentation pop. And then also she's coming for meditation to be able to cool her jets a little bit, and also craft what she's saying and look at how can she actually reach into the hearts of a judge that she's already deemed will be difficult for her. So this is a big thing, no matter where you are on the scale, whether you're a new presenter or you're somebody who's really been doing it forever. One of the things that I think that help that stuckness, that ice pack in your gut, or that sense of change, is to do something that is so simple. It's going to seem like really, but it's real, which is to lengthen your spine and to lift the crown of your head up and ground through your sits bones if you're seated in front of a camera, or your feet if you're standing in front of a group. To actually, when you lengthen your spine, you open up. I'm going to talk woo-woo for a moment. You're going to open up energy moving up and down that spine. When you open up when you start to open up this way, your feet are grounded, which means you actually have access to having a leg to stand on, your confidence, that sense of being really in your power. And when you lift the crown of your head, you're opening up to a sense of bring in the information, the sense of clarity that I need to be able to present really clearly from my heart. I'm always interested in how to present from the heart. That's just who I am. And in Qigong, which is one of the martial arts that I've been doing for close to 50 years now and has informed so much of what I do as a performer and on stage and as a coach, is this concept called the cobra and the lamb. And the cobra is this backbone of your heart. It's the space between your heart. And think of a cobra with its hood spreading, right? It's very directed. You're focusing just on what it is that you want to offer to people. And the lamb is all about the front of the heart, the reciprocity, the sense of exchange that we can have when we're really feeling connected with others. So we want to have a balance between that passion and that reciprocity. So to do that, when we lengthen the spine, and that's all it takes, feeling ourselves long, and then allow your clavicles, your collarbones to, I think of them as smiling, just them opening up, that's going to open up this part of your body. When you open up this part of the body, I mean, just look, you can see, I'm going to tell you something that's really important. I'm going to tell you something that's really important. It's not, I mean, they radiate something different. So just opening this up allows people and allows you to feel like, okay, there's some place for that stuck energy to move, because when we're scared, we cramp down and then we hold it there. It's like, I don't want to move. But when we open, it opens up the solar plexus, the heart, and the throat. The solar plexus being the fountain of something called Wei Qi, which has to do with externalized energy that comes out that people say, oh, I want to get to know that person, or, no, I don't think that's my person. That's people read this all the time, even though we don't call it something, with Chinese words. It's, we
It's
used to call
whether
it
you're
good.
arm's length or arms wide open.
Exactly. Yeah. Good or bad vibes. Right.
Right. And you know it like you know a good melon at the grocery store. Like, that person's got something funky in their energy, and I'm not buying it, or I'm not doing it, or I'm not feeling it. And you just know that.
It's palpable. It's palpable. Yeah. And I didn't really get that until I actually had an experience where, in fact, the reason I got into martial arts was really for self-defense. I grew up in New York City, where it's very practical. What you see is what you get. The sky is shaped like the tops of buildings. Everything is square and solid. I was really afraid that when I moved to California, I was going to become one of those woo people whose feet never touch the ground. And I'd become my worst fear, right? Because I teach people about energy all the time. So anyway, when I started doing the martial arts, I had been beaten up on the street, and I wanted to learn how to, take care of myself in a different way. And I had been training in this very, very, a style of martial arts that really is based on street fighting and combat. It's called Kajikembo. It was created in Hawaii by 5 masters of different forms, just trying to take care of their people. So I'd been training in it for quite a long time. I think I was training for my black belt at that time. I can't remember, but I was training on it for quite a long time. And my partner at the time was training at the same place that I was, and we were breaking up. So we were fighting at home, and then we'd get to the dojo, or what was called a kun. And for some reason, our teacher thought it would be great to have us spar with each other a lot. So we were literally hitting each other, kicking each other in the kun, and then going home and screaming at each other. It was not my favorite time in my life, not what I usually talk about that much. But I was walking home from our BART, which is basically a subway here in the Bay Area. And I was thinking to myself, I'm really tired of hitting and kicking. I'm tired of hurting people. I'm tired of getting hurt. There's got to be another way. And when I got home, I got a call from somebody who later became my Qigong, one of my Qigong teachers. And she said, Vicki, you don't really need to know these external arts. I think you need to learn more about this internal movement of energy, the Qigong. And I had been doing Tai Chi, which is a form of Qigong, since I was a kid. So I was familiar with it. But when I started working with her, I discovered the name for this energy that we exude is called Wei Qi. And as I was walking home, I got to a corner. A man walks around the corner. It was just like you said in the grocery store with the melon. It was like, I just could feel this was, and I was very alert at that point to, danger. As it was like, I don't think so. What I did was I just simply lengthened my spine instinctively. I didn't know what I was doing. This was not intentional. I lengthened my spine and I thought to myself, I am, as opposed to you can't. So this is an important distinction I could talk about in a second, because it goes out into boundaries in all kinds of ways. But as he walked by me, he reached out to grab me, and his hand literally bounced about 6 inches or 8 inches from contact with my body. He reached out and it bounced. And he walked away looking at his hand and looking at me and looking at his hand and looking at me. So I knew that he hadn't missed, but that he had actually felt something. And then when I got home and I heard about, you don't really need to do these external arts, because I didn't go into some kind of fighting pose. Then I realized that this is actually palpable. It's real. It's not just a perception. It's not just body language. It's something bigger and more powerful. Yes, exactly. And then I started thinking about, well, what if you could use that energy, same kind of energy that'll help you, go through a bunch of bricks or boards with your hand. What if we could apply that in our businesses in terms of how we deliver, whether we're looking at clients or working with clients or talking to referral partners, or we're actually on a stage delivering our message? What if we were using that energy? And that's part of
So
what I love to work with people.
When you teach people how to do that, does that allow them to tap into some kind of a secret sauce that changes the game for them?
Absolutely, 100,000%. It absolutely changes the game, because and it starts with this sense of opening up that energy flow, not getting stuck, right? And all Chinese medicine and Western medicine too, stagnation is a key to what happens with disease, whether it's emotional or mental or physical. So yes, it is a secret. I call it the secret sauce behind charisma, is that sense of allowing yourself to be in your fullness, owning your power, in your confidence. And there's all kinds of subtle cues that your body gives off, and to start to really recognize what those are so that you can own them and pivot them so that it's serving you in a way that's resourceful, as opposed to something that takes something away.
Oh, that was so good. I have studied under many speaker trainers in my lifetime, and I'm always on the path to mastery. And I have to compliment you, because being in relationship with you, without even being engaged with you as a client, but just watching you do your thing, it's so interesting how I've been able to embrace some of the concepts that you talk about. It's such a fluid, beautiful thing to learn how to be your best self in a conversation with a human being. And then when you can imagine that there are tens or 20 or 100 or 1,000 people also listening, that they might also be feeling the kind of energy and intention that we are bringing to our message, that's where real influence takes root to grow. And I am a very practical person, and I am someone who has resisted the woo perhaps more than I want to even confess. But I want to say that it has been very game changing for me to know you and to experience the way you express yourself and the way your own presence makes an impact on others, because I think that ends up becoming a legacy gift that you give to people. You have no idea how many lives you've touched and transformed just by sharing the way that you have today. So I'm just very, very honored that you would share all this with us.
Well, that goes right into my heart, Nancy. Thank you so much. Your words mean the world to me.
So I want to say, like, to those who are watching today, if you are one of those practical people who has been resisting things for longer than you want to. There's another concept that is what you resist persists. And that applies to all kinds of things. But if you have been resisting embodying your message and making a real connection to human beings on the other side of the camera, and you have felt the dismay that comes from not having the rewards that you're wanting, I think you probably need to have a chat with Vicki, because I think Vicki can really help you out and be the catalyst for you to get beyond what you may have been resisting, so that your own performance, your presence, your impact can exponentiate, and you can have an even bigger impact through your work. So Vicki, I'm pretty sure that people are going to have fallen in love with you today, having had this conversation. So how can they take a step in your direction to continue the conversation?
Thank you so much for asking, Nancy. If you feel like you're somebody who feels like, I'm close to it, I'm there, or you're somebody who's even spoken a lot, but you want to take it to the next level, or you feel like, I just can't deal with the stage fright, it's just holds me back, or you're not quite sure that your message is quite honed to where you want it to be, and you want to figure that out, I would love to talk to you. It would be just a joy for me. So you can contact me, we can have a short conversation, and I can kind of give you a little bit of an energy read right there, and a little bit of coaching around your message. Just go to yourpowerpresence.com. And right there, you'll be able to sign up for a complimentary session with me, helping people really come forward as their best self is not only something that I love to do, but I think one of the reasons I'm so passionate about it is I think that our planet is a place of a pivotal change on so many levels. And I believe that the more we can come forward with who we are in our authenticity, hold our stories, and really look at what it is that the good is that we're bringing to the world, that's what's going to change everything. So I'm on a mission to see the world change in my lifetime. So I don't have that many years left. So please do contact me if it's something that you feel like you have something that you want to bring forward that will help people.
So it's yourpowerpresence.com.
Yourpowerpresence.com.
I'll be sure to put that in the show notes. And I'm hoping that everybody who's walking their dog and riding their bike and doing multiple activities will remember that yourpowerpresence.com is the avenue to connect with Vicki Joio, who will allow you to bring your power presence to the live or virtual stage in a way that will change the game for you and maybe even help change the world. So thank you for being here today, Vicki. Thank you for those who are watching live. Thank you for those who will watch by replay. If you've loved this conversation, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please invite friends to do the same. Then you'll always be first to know the next amazing guest that I bring to the Learn More, Earn More show. Vicki, it's been great to have you here. And thank you again for all that you have shared. You are amazing.
Thank you so much, Nancy. It's a joy always to connect with you in any way that I can.
Thank you. All right. Well, we'll see you next time. Let's see.